Okay, let's start today's event. So first of all, it is a great honor to be an MC of this today's side event on the Republic of Korea's new NDC and net zero 2050 strategies. My name is Bu Young-kang, and I am an environmental attaché at the Korean Embassy Bonn office in Germany. On behalf of the Korean government, I appreciate all the participants, including the distinguished panelists, for coming here tonight. To begin with, I'm honored to introduce to you the Korean Minister of Environment, Dr. Jung-hae Han, to deliver her welcoming remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome her with a big round of applause.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I am very happy to meet you at the event with the theme of Korea's 2030 NDC and 2050 carbon neutral strategy at the COP26. Mr. Mark Van Kellen, Ambassador of Climate Change to the EU Commission, and Mr. Chris Buss, Director of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, Mr. Tom House, Head of the Energy and Environment of the International Energy Agency, and Ms. Susan Patterson, Director of the UNEPTTU Partnership. I'd like to express my sincere gratitude for your participation. And I also like to thank Ms. Patricia Espinosa, Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC, for her congratulatory message. And Ms. Yoon Soon-jin, Chair of the Carbon Neutrality Commission, for her presentation. Excellencies, to keep 1.5 degree target alive, the next 10 years should be a decade of bold action and a decade of the great transformation. This means we should take the path that is both sustainable and carbon neutral. Korea achieved its rapid economic growth, spurred by heavy and chemical industry drive. Our 2050 carbon neutrality goal is indeed a serious challenge, but we have taken decisive steps. The first step was taken in October last year when we declared our vision to go carbon neutral by 2050. This vision presents a carbon neutral future harmonized with economic prosperity and better quality of life. In September, Korea has become the 14th country to have its carbon neutrality vision enshrined in law. And today, at the COP26, Korea announced that it would raise the 2030 NDC from 26.3% to 40% compared to 2018. In addition, we have declared that we joined the Global Methane Pledge to reduce global methane emissions by 30% or more by 2030. Korea's 2030 and this goal is not an easy task. Korea has a manufacturing-centered industry and has a short period from the peak of the emissions to carbon neutrality. However, our ambitious goal represents the strong and robust political will of Korea to achieve carbon neutrality and respond to the climate crisis. Distinguished guests, the COVID-19 has brought us at a crossroad of multiple challenges of health, economy, and environment. And it's our mission to overcome them. In particular, responding to the climate crisis is a critical task that the world must address all together. Korea will continue to do its part as a responsible member of the international community. We will share our lessons learned and experiences with the rest of the world in our journey toward the carbon neutral future. Excellencies, please gather your wisdom today. Korea is ready to listen to your voices and run the road toward carbon neutrality unwaveringly. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister, for the wonderful remarks. Now I'm pleased to introduce the UN Secretary of General, Ms. Patricia Espinosa, Because of her busy schedule, she sent us a pre-recorded congratulatory remarks.
Excellencies, it's a pleasure to join my distinguished colleague, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, in offering my congratulations to the Republic of Korea for today's special announcement. Colleagues, the nationally determined contributions are a cornerstone of the Paris Agreement. They tell us how nations plan to reduce emissions under that agreement and adapt to the impacts of climate change. The latest NDC report, synthesizing information from all available national climate action plans, provided significant insight into our collective progress. The bad news is that the overall data indicates that greenhouse gas emissions are increasing. The good news is that same report also showed that for those nations who did provide updated or new NDCs, greenhouse gas emissions are projected to decrease 9% by 2030 compared to 2010. They provide an example not only that the ratchet mechanism under the Paris Agreement can and does work, but that the pathway to the 1.5-degree goal for all nations exists. Many of these nations have also announced carbon neutrality goals around the middle of the century, potentially resulting in even greater emissions reductions. Today's announcement by the Republic of Korea of an enhanced emissions reduction target with plans for reaching carbon neutrality is therefore very encouraging. It shows what is possible, even for countries with a large share of energy-intensive industries with densely populated urban societies. It is also an example of how economic growth and carbon neutrality can work in tandem as nations begin the transition to green, prosperous futures. It is also an excellent beginning to COP26, and I encourage all nations to step up and announce their own more ambitious plans. Incidentally, I remind all nations that they can revisit and reissue improved NDCs at any point. In fact, I urge them to do exactly that. It is now more important than ever that we all pull together to reduce our emissions profile. We also must see provision of support by developed to developing nations, specifically the delivery on the 100 billion commitment made years ago. Simply put, if there is support for developing nations, emissions reductions could potentially be even higher. Developing countries need this support to drive climate action. Dear colleagues, there is no doubt that this is the most important COP since the signing of the Paris Agreement 6 years ago. We must get it right. We have the platform for action in the form of the Paris Agreement. We have a pathway to success through the NDC process, and we have the science that shows that while achieving the 1.5-degree goal will be extremely difficult, it is still possible. But global leaders must take decisive action over the next 2 weeks. The time has come for leaders to compromise and make the tough decisions that go beyond the narrow scope of national self-interests and embrace the necessary climate decisions to protect all of humanity. Today's event is an excellent way to help us kick off COP26 on a very positive note. And for that, I offer my thanks, gratitude, and congratulations to the Republic of Korea for its revised NDC and carbon neutrality strategies. Thank you.
Now we are moving into the main presentation of today. Let me introduce the presenter, Professor Sun-jin Yoon. She is the co-chair of the 2050 Commission on Carbon Neutrality of the Republic of Korea. Please welcome her with a big round of applause.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is honor of me to give presentation about 2030 enhanced NDC to you, and maybe a little about our 2050 carbon neutrality scenarios. Thank you so much to be with us and to think about and to give comment on Korea's enhanced 2030 NDC. So let me give my presentation about the enhanced 2030 NDC of South Korea. Yeah, climate change or many climate extreme events is not new one anymore. So we have heard about news about climate calamities, extremities all over the world. Especially this year, we have witnessed flood and many fires all over the world. And because after maybe facing this kind of climate events, and IPCC's special report, climate change and 1.5 Celsius special report, and currently IPCC already published the sixth report about climate change. So we all know about how important, how serious of climate change, and many countries have begun announced their carbon neutrality maybe target is generally 2050, or some countries 2060. But anyway, to achieve our 2050 carbon neutrality goal, we should enhance our 2030 nationally determined contributions, which were maybe announced in 2015. So as you can see here, major economies, countries have announced their enhanced 2030 NDC to achieve their ultimate goal, carbon neutrality by 2050. You can see here many countries enhanced 2030 NDCs. So South Korea cannot be an exception. So our President Moon Jae-in announced the 2050 carbon neutrality goal last year, October 28th, at maybe the administrative addresses at National Assembly. Before that time, the South Korean government announced Green New Deal, which is a part of Korean New Deal, on July 14th of last year to achieve maybe a low carbon society. But after 3 months later, our government announced the 2050 carbon neutrality plan as a response to climate change crisis. And maybe we have not heard that, but the government issued the 2050 carbon neutrality promotion plan last December 7th. And then this year, there was a big leaders summit on climate convened by Joe Biden, president of the US, and many countries announced that they enhanced the 2030 NDC. And at that time, President Moon Jae-in promised to enhance our NDC by the end of this year. And then the President Moon Jae-in visited the US on May, and he promised to maybe shorten the time of announcement of 2030 enhanced NDC. And in the meantime, the commission, 2050 Carbon Neutrality Commission, belonging to the president, was inaugurated last May, and I became a co-chairperson of that commission. So from that time, our government, including 2050 CNC, thought about maybe made big effort to establish our 2050 carbon neutrality scenarios and to enhance our 2030 NDC. And the end of August, our National Assembly enact the Framework Act on Carbon Neutrality and Green Growth. It was 14th time of the world. So we came to have some legal basis to push our carbon neutrality target by 2050. And the National Assembly required the government to enhance its 2030 NDC at least over 35%. So that was the basis of our new plan for 2030 NDC. And based on that kind of legal basis and the government maybe draft about 2030 NDC, the 2050 Carbon Neutrality Commission thoroughly reviewed the government's draft, and we collected public opinions and opinions of stakeholders. So we have had more than 100 times of meetings to collect opinions from the public and stakeholders. And we had the general meeting of CNC last October 18th, and we passed our plan for 2050 NDC. It was a 40% reduction from 2018 emissions. And last week, there was a cabinet meeting, and finally, the decision was passed. That was the process of our 2030 NDC decision. And let me show you what is the composition of our 2030 NDC. Originally, it was 26.3% from 2018 emissions, but it was strengthened to 40%. So you can see here, so our maybe planned emission in 2030 will become 436 million tons by 2030. So it was maybe over 100 million tons from our the first original NDC. So it is a little challenging one, but I will say about later, but some people are not satisfied with this enhanced NDC because, some people think it is too loose, too weak. So another people think it is too sudden, too challenging. So still we have a controversy in Korea. But anyway, the government decided this target based on general opinion, and we think it is our necessity. It is not choice anymore. So we should follow this law. And in Korea, we have many proverbs. 10 miles walk should start with the first one step. So the first step is very important. And where starting is maybe half done. So this kind of approach is very important. But anyway, you can see here, compared with other countries, Korea's situation is not maybe it's a little hard because, as you know, our peak emission happened in 2018. So compared with the other developed countries, our peak time is a little late. It means we do not have enough time by 2050. So just 32 years left to make carbon neutrality by 2050. So compared with EU and UK, their basic year or peak time was 1990. So they can have more time compared with us. They maybe have had 60 years by 2050. And in case of US, their base year was 2005. And in case of Japan, their base year was 2013. So the remaining time to 2050 is much longer than us. And compared with the other countries, the share of manufacturing industry is a little high. Not just a little, I think very high compared to the other major economies. In our case, our manufacturing industry, the share of manufacturing industry is around 30%, 29.1% in 2018. But others, in case of US, 11.30%, EU, 14.8%, UK, 8.8%, Japan, 20.7%. It means it is not easy. It is very difficult for us to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions because those manufacturing industry is very heavy emitters and their energy consumption is very high. So it means that the average rate of annual reduction by 50, in our case, the rate is much higher than other countries. But anyway, to fit the target of 2050 carbon neutrality, we should hurry. So we enhanced our 2030 NDC by 40% compared with 2018. So you can see here sectoral reduction rate. Sectoral reduction rate is a little different because the conditions and circumstances are very different sector by sector. So in case of industrial sector, its reduction rate is much lower than other sector because, as I mentioned, our industry is very energy intensive and highly emitting. So they need time, and it is related with our jobs, employment, and Korean economy. So in case of energy transformation sector and waste sector, its reduction rate is over 40% within, I think, maybe 9 years by 2030. So it is very challenging. And in other sectors, building, transportation, it is over 30%. It is not easy. It is very challenging. But anyway, we should achieve such goal to make carbon neutrality by 2050. And even though we are making efforts to reduce in sector by sector, still we need to apply CCUS and carbon 6. Otherwise, it is much more difficult. But anyway, it is our plan. So I can show you sector by sector, but we do not have enough time. So you can see here just in case of transformation sector, 44.4%. And you can see here, maybe the share of renewable energy by 2030 should become over 30%. It is 6.2% in 2018. So it is very challenging. So it is a kind of attacking point by opponent of 2030 NDC. They say, how can we make this plan? We cannot do that. It is impossible. From 6.2% to 30.2% within 9 years? That is impossible. That is their argument. But anyway, it is our plan. And industrial sector, as I mentioned, its reduction rate is a little mild compared to the other industry. But in Korea, industry sector shares over 36% of our greenhouse gas emission. And if we include indirect emission, its share of greenhouse gas emission is over 50%, 54%. So it is very crucial to reduce industrial sector's greenhouse gas emissions to achieve 2030 NDC and 2050 carbon neutrality. In case of steel industry, petroleum, chemistry, cement, those four sectors make over 75% of industrial sector's emissions. So it is very maybe challenging. And building sector, it is also very difficult. But anyway, we should do our best. We should enhance the energy efficiency. We should make a zero energy house, and we should make more projects to have green remodeling and make energy more cleaner to use in the buildings. And the transportation sector, especially it is related to our employment. In case of Korea, car industry employs over 7% of our total jobs. So it is very important. But anyway, we should reduce the share of internal combustion engine cars into hydrogen or electric cars. So in this transportation sector, 37.8% reduction should be achieved. And agriculture, livestock, and fishing, maybe you know, it is related to people's diet and farmers and fishermen. So it is not easy or either. So low carbon agriculture, livestock management, and supplying high efficiency equipment, those are our strategies. And waste, more than maybe 46.8% reduction within 9 years. It's also very challenging, but we should do our best. Waste reduction and reuse should come first, and we should use ecological plastics and biogas. And hydrogen and carbon 6 and CCUS, yeah, we have this kind of plans. So I should save time. So you can see here, until now, you heard about our total reduction rate and the sectoral reduction rates. So the government should support R&D of core technology to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and government should support commercialization of those technologies. It is very important because in Korea, people don't want to give up the current life quality. So development of technology is very important. And in addition, we should change our lifestyle also. So we have many campaigns and movements to push this kind of activities. And in the meantime, supporting just the transition is also very important. So current energy intensive industries employs many people. So they have a kind of a threat to continue their jobs. So it is very important. Also, in some region, they have very energy intensive factories and industries. They also have some problems in the process of transition toward carbon neutrality, and especially in the short time, 2030 NDC achievement. But you know, it is the way we should go. Otherwise, climate change is a threat also. The economic risk also associated. So we should change our current situation. That is the way we should achieve. So maybe this afternoon already, the President Moon Jae-in announced our 2030 NDC, and the reason why we are taking this challenging path, that is our mission, because the current generation has a kind of mission to tackle with climate change for our future generations' life. Actually, President Moon also argued or suggested the young generation, the youth summit of the world. So this kind of actions needs to be taken for our sustainable society. So the President Moon also emphasized we will not put up this project until the next government, but will build a firm foundation for carbon neutrality within the term of this administration. And you know, I am attacked by both sides in Korea. Very active environmental activists criticize me because I'm very loose, because 40% is very loose target. But in case of industrial sector, they criticize me and our commission very strongly because it is not realistic. Our industry will have a very difficult situation because of this enhanced 2030 NDC. But I think we cannot avoid this 2050 carbon neutrality. It is a movable target or our international norm. So we should think about the way. It cannot be avoided or escaped. Consideration we should have is how to achieve. That is our task. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Yoon, for the interesting presentation. All of us now are understanding the Korean's new NDC, how it came out and how it looks like, and her struggles as well. So to begin with the panel discussion today, I'm pleased to introduce the distinguished panelists. Mark Van Hoekelen, Ambassador at Large of Climate Diplomacy, European External Action Service. Tom House, Head of Energy and Environmental Division, International Energy Agency, IEA. Susan Peterson, Director of the Partnership between UN Environmental Program and the Technical University of Denmark, UNEP DTU. Chris Boss, the Director of the Center for the Economy and Finance, International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN. And Professor Yoon is again on the stage to chair the panel discussion. Professor Yoon, now the floor is yours.
Yeah, it is a little awkward because I presented and I will chair this session too. But anyway, it is economic. Yeah, good. So anyway, because our time is limited, maybe around 5 minutes will be given to you. So maybe you are asked, maybe 2 questions were given to you about your opinion. I think maybe just let me. How do you think about Korea's enhanced NDC? And please recommend strategies to achieve the Korean NDCs, or maybe in the long run, carbon neutrality. Especially as you have heard, Korea's economic situation is a little different from other major economies, developed countries. So our energy intensive industry is the basis of our economy. So this kind of difficult and different situation, what kind of strategies we can take and push to realize our 2030 NDC and 2015 carbon neutrality? Yeah, first.
Thank you. Do you hear me?
Yeah,
Thank you, Professor Yoon, for your very interesting presentation. For the sake of brevity, let me go straight away into the 2 questions that you have put. The first is, what sort of assessment do we make of your new NDC, and what sort of advices may we give to you? I mean, obviously, we welcome your new NDC. It's a clear improvement. Setting a climate neutrality goal for 2050 is an important step, but 2030 makes it much more real. Politicians that currently make a carbon neutrality target for 2050 won't be around anymore. 2030, they will still be around, or at least some of them. So that becomes very real. So it's good that you've now set a target. I think the climate community hoped for a new target that started with a 4. You have now a 40% target, so you're within the ballpark of what the international community had expected. We have gone quickly through your plan. Very interesting. There are a number of things, of course, that might need some further clarification. The first is, as far as what you call absorption and removal is concerned, you put some emphasis on carbon capture and storage. That's an important element of your plan. On the other hand, we all know that this is an experimental technology. We talk about it already for many years, but I haven't seen yet a commercially viable CCS or CCUS operation. So it's important that this gets clarified. The other one is, unlike the European Union, we have said we're going to go for a target that is fully domestic. 5% or 6% of your 40% will have to come from abroad. So measures or offsets that you will acquire abroad, presumably through Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. But as you know, we still are in negotiations about it. So that's going to be interesting to see how you're going to achieve that. What is clear is you will have a very steep fall in the reliance on coal, which I think is indeed something that has to be done. I think you will also have to tackle head-on methane. Methane is the cheapest and fastest way to do something about global warming. And we are happy that you have joined the Global Methane Pledge, which we're going to launch tomorrow. Finally, because I see that the clock is advancing, in terms of advice. In the European Union, we set ourselves a target for 2020. We achieved the target. We have now gone for an improved target from 40% in 2030 to minus 55% in 2030 compared to 1990 when we peaked. Our workhorse to get emissions down is called carbon pricing. The emissions trading scheme has been really for us the main instrument. I can only advise you introduce carbon pricing in the Korean economy. It gives you a daily incentive for industry to become more efficient and sell excess allowances to others. The market is wonderful. Turn the invisible hand green. Back to you.
Thank you so much. Actually, in Korea, we are talk and consider the introduction of carbon pricing. Actually, one project is undertaken by researchers supported by 4 government ministries. But anyway, people's willingness to pay is very important. So that point is a little different from European case, but we should persuade our citizens to pay for that, and our industries maybe needs to think about more active carbon pricing policies. But anyway, thank you so much for your comments, especially not our 40% is not domestic one alone. Yet it includes international cooperation. So 35.4% is domestic one, but that is at least one. So we should give more focus on domestic reduction. Yeah, we know about it. And as you mentioned, maybe Article 6 has not been settled down. So it is very important to make more effort on our domestic reduction. But we think international cooperation is also important for life quality enhancement of developing countries. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, next, maybe Susan Pedersen. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm very pleased to see my friends here from South Korea. I had the pleasure of spending 2 years at the Global Green Growth Institute as the Assistant Director General there. So I'm very pleased to see the impressive progress you've made. You from a position somewhere at the back of the pack of the OECD countries, you're now part of the front runners at the 14 countries. So I think that's great. I will not repeat some of the things that was being said. I'm aware of the challenges that you have with your industrial sector and also the high dependency on imported fuels, etc. So I'm my organization supports emerging economies and developing countries in their low carbon transition. So I'm very interested in hearing about Korea's international role. We look to you now in two important fronts. First, the question is whether you will be a leader in Asia to try to convince other Asian countries to step up climate action. One of the key obstacles to carbon neutrality is the use of coal, and Asian economies have increased coal use in recent years. And replacing that coal with clean energy will definitely be a top priority, and hopefully Korea can lead the way in Asia. So I really noticed at the P4G summit in Korea this year that you announced that you would not provide ODA or any other public finance for coal-fired power plants abroad, on top of phasing out your own coal-fired power plants. So this is really great. Second point is developing countries will also look to advanced economies such as Korea, especially as you're one of the countries that have moved from receiving ODA to now giving ODA. So it's very significant that Korea has committed to increase the green share of your official development assistance. So there are definitely things that people will look towards you. And also, as Mark said just a minute ago, you are not planning to do it alone. You will work with other countries. And Article 6 is certainly one of the key issues. And my organizations, together with the Global Green Growth Institute, will now announce here at COP a major initiative financed by the German Ministry of Environment to really make possible trading platforms and enable governments and private sector companies to obtain and buy carbon credits internationally. So my last point is really a question more, is it expected that Korea will take more initiatives in relation to further carbon trading or green investments? And also, what action do you plan actually to accelerate climate action in developing countries and become more of an ODA actor? So that's probably all for me. Thank you.
We think our government has feel some responsibility to support developing countries' enhancement in terms of their life quality and cleaner energy use. So I think your comment is very nice and very helpful to us to move forward, and especially international cooperation with the developing countries. We have such statement. Our cooperation with the developing countries should contribute to enhance life quality of citizens in developing countries and contribute to reduction of global carbon emissions. So that is the baseline of our international cooperation. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, next, maybe Tom. Yeah.
But we also welcome the new and improved NDC.
Thank you.
I think it's, from our perspective, we're a global energy agency. We undertake a lot of analysis, and the world knows our scenarios. And when we looked most recently in the World Energy Outlook, the current policies of governments around the world, current policies do not deliver enough. They get us to a 2.1 degree world, far warmer than we want to. And it's only when countries such as Korea make the improved pledges that we are getting into the right direction. So with the pledges that have been announced by about 56 countries around the world to date, that's helping to tip the curve. So we're getting in the right ballpark. The announced pledges today should get us to perhaps, it's about 2.1 degrees world scenario. So there's still some way to go. But for me, I think the Korean example is a great one that we want to help explore and educate, because you've not only shown a high level of ambition in terms of creating an absolute target, your jump from your peaking emissions to net zero emissions, 32 years, is one of the shortest around. So that's a strong ambition. So you show ambition, You show great clarity. You're creating a climate law. I think you and the EU are the two leaders in creating climate laws to show that you need to cement it in a proper legal format and very clearly. And you've also done it with great transparency. You've created an extensive reporting regime, a ministry responsible, and so on. So I think you've shown a very good way to the rest of the world as to how to take steps to do this. And also, I like your points at the end in terms of planning were very important because, as you say, this is a mile-long project, and you might have NGOs who want you to run 2 miles, but your response is correct that let's start with the first step. And the first step is the plans that you're setting forward. You mentioned the planning, looking at every sector. What is the decarbonisation plan in every sector for heavy industry, for transport, and so on? And also looking at innovation, because again, given Korea's particular heavy industry intensity, the scope for innovation dealing with introducing new technologies, perhaps CCUS, perhaps hydrogen, these particularly in sectors which are quite hard to abate otherwise. So the scope for developing a strong innovation policy is something that is also something where Korea leads. And then, of course, you're starting with a green financing initiative. I think you've already announced a large investment, but really the trillions that are needed in green investments around the world are really one of the greatest obstacles, which I hope the people around the tables these 2 weeks are really going to tackle, because the financing, raising the investment is a critical issue. So again, Korea has a good example there. And lastly, the just transition approach that you take is fundamental. No country is capable of making progress or demonstrating to others that progress is possible unless you address the distributional aspect and provide recognized compensation, whether that's through the ETS regimes or otherwise. So for us, it's a really useful, transparent approach, and for us, it's a good best practice, and we are happy to help share that message around the world.
Thank you. We know about the importance of implementation. So just the announcement is not enough. It is just the first step. So we 2050 Carbon Neutrality Commission will review the government's implementation plan, and each year we will make report of our comments, and we can make some feedback, and we can make effort to push our government to realize our target already announced. Yeah, thank you so much.
I've replaced Stuart as Chris Buss. And actually, well, Stuart himself was one of the leaders on the forest landscape restoration movement. And it's interesting. You talked about implementation, and Korea has been one of the leaders in implementation of forest landscape restoration, and I think a lot of the discussion. Yes, we're talking about the NDCs, but it's also important from a nature and conservation perspective, the broader range of benefits that come from restoration. And just some figures of the 6 million hectares of land that's been restored in Korea has been valued from the prevention of landslides, soil erosion, etc., over $11 billion, and that's extremely significant. And so when you're talking about the role that nature and nature-based solutions are taking in your NDC, I think it's very important that we're seeing this very much from a perspective of in your enhanced NDCs of building on your strategy for nature-based solutions in climate change mitigation and adaptation. And you know, we in any energy transition, there is a role for nature, for removals, for sinks, and nature and the soils, the trees are an essential part of that. And it's great to see that, and congratulations not only in you having it in your NDC, but for the work you've done previously, and an opportunity for you to build on that, of the work that's been driven by the Korean Forest Service and others, and also moving the perspective of forest management and land management beyond their specific sectors and making it much broader. I think one of the challenges that there is out there is now when we're looking at nature-based solutions for mitigation, it's not a substitute for rapid decarbonisation. It's not a 1+1. It must, this is removals and sinks, but it's not to say. And I think the figures you've got is that decarbonisation is up front and centre. But we're using not just nature-based solutions for their carbon benefits, but the returns they have on there. And in the nature-based solutions standard that IUCN has done through its membership, that those key principles that Tom, you mentioned, just transition, the role of people in that transition of making those decisions, but also the impact on biodiversity as well. And I think one of the strong threads that we're seeing through this COP and previous COPs, and is getting stronger and stronger, is that role of nature and climate and the challenges we have there. And so whilst it's delivering your NDCs, it's also bringing multiple benefits as well. And I think that's an exciting part of this. And in that, I think one of the things we as IUCN, with its 1,300 members, 60 state members, and then NGOs in the consultation process over 2 years to get to that level of detail and buy into both the concept but also the standard. I think that's also a good level of quality assurance, that you're not just doing these for various reasons. It's not just about trees planted for carbon capture. It is about a broader range of benefits that it's doing and making sure that it's done right. And that's what the NBS standard will also help apply as well. So congratulations on your work.
I know ICUN is very important, as I mentioned, in the process or history of the concept of sustainable development. Your organization contributed a lot. You make the first story of sustainable development conceptualization. Thank you. But in Korea, we are looking the importance of forest or nature-based absorption capacity more and more, because carbon neutrality requires emission reduction and absorption. But in Korea, our land, maybe 64% of our land is forest. And actually, after colonial period and Korean War, our forest was destroyed totally. So we has made a successful story in replanting, reforestation. But nowadays we have a little problem, because some very fundamental maybe conservationists oppose cutting trees because they think it should be conserved. But we need some kind of approach to have a sustainable forest management, and that we can enhance our absorption capacity of our forest, and we can keep biodiversity, and we can maybe avoid maybe landslides. So both maybe multiple purpose we should realize. That is our very important task recently. So thank you so much for your comments. And as I mentioned, maybe we just made the first step. We already announced our 2020 target in 2009, but unfortunately we could not make our target realized, because our real emission in 2020 was 100 million tons higher than we expected. So we should not repeat that kind of story again. So at this time, we should achieve our 2030 target. So to make that, we need to make more specific and realistic implementation plan, and we need to review and make more much more strategy to achieve that goal. In that sense, maybe we need your help in the long run, not just today. So in the future and in near future, I think global cooperation is very important to make our 2050 carbon neutrality, and maybe as a planning level, not just one country level. So in that sense, global cooperation is very important. Thank you so much. So
Thank you everyone for the informative and inspiring discussion today. Well, for your well, sorry, due to the time limit, we don't have question Q&A today.
Won't have a 5
Yeah,
minutes
okay,
left.
okay, yes.
I'm a researcher of solution for our climate. And then thank you so much for the presentation and the panel talk today. I have two questions, but I'll make it very short. Despite that, I fully appreciate and all the work that has been done by the chair, Yoon. But I wanted to point out that the Korea's NDC number has been made from the two different standards of the net emission and also total emission. So I was wondering if that's acceptable measure by the UNFCCC, because if we subtract the emission from the total emission and then the total emission between the 2 years is 30%, around 30%. So I was wondering if that kind of calculation is acceptable in UN, and then I was wondering how you think about that.
So yeah, I guess this is not the question regarding our panelists today, and that is explained in the press release from the Ministry of Environment. I'm sorry. So
Yeah, do you understand what she raised? Yeah, because our maybe base year, the emission is a total emission, and our target year's emission is net emission. But we search it other countries' target, and that such maybe a target setting is allowed.
So I guess that was explained in the press release by Ministry of Environment Korea. So I guess we will just share with her later time. Thank you for understanding. Yes, and for your information, the presentation material of today will be distributed at the Korean Pavilion from tomorrow. Please understand the inconvenience due to logistic issue and come back to pick up a copy if you are interested. While the UN climate change COP26 just started yesterday, and it's been a quarter of century since the world agreed on that we need to work on tackling climate change. Some are skeptical, but we definitely know that we will be making changes. Today, I hope you witness it another changes made from Republic of Korea to the world. And the Republic of Korea won't spare any effort to realize its NDC and net zero strategy. Please keep your eyes on its journey toward net zero by 2050. Now it's time to close today's event. On behalf of the Korean government, thank you. I appreciate all of you for making your time in your busy schedule to join here today. Hopefully this event will be beneficial for everybody. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.